Senator Usakos.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm also very proud and happy to rise and lend my name and, of course, the support of the Conservative caucus to this initiative by Senator Dalphon. And I'm very happy to see that we have a renewed sense of enthusiasm for human rights here in the Senate of Canada in a very collegial way. And I'm, like I said, pleased to work with Senator Dalphon, Senator Omidyar, and Senator Melville-Duchesne, and everyone else who obviously recognizes the plight of Vladmir Kara-Murza. I think at the end of the day, we all recognize that he's a politician, he's a journalist, he's an advocate for democracy and freedom. He's obviously a recipient of the Civil Courage Award. He's a fellow of the Raoul Wallenberg Center. He's been recognized for his work and for human rights and fighting against authoritarianism by Amnesty International. But more importantly, he's a son. He's a husband. He's a father. At the end of the day, he is basically in prison, and his life was put at risk and faced a couple of assassination attempts for the simple fact of doing what we should be doing and are doing here on a regular basis, getting on our feet and calling into question a government when they do overreach, calling into question public policy in a democracy, criticizing their government or his government, basically calling into question an outrageous war, a crisis against humanity of what's going on in Ukraine by this brutal regime, a bully. And of course, we lend our support in recognition and highlighting the challenges of Kara-Murza. And of course, I think it would be an honor for Canada to have this gentleman be bestowed the right of honorary citizenship. But I also want to highlight and point out that even though it's noble that we are taking this action, and of course the House of Commons has been working at this for a number of months, the question I ask is, why is it taking so long? And of course I applaud the work of Irvin Kotler. He is a great former parliamentarian and defender of human rights, and Bill Browder, but it shouldn't have taken an intervention on the part of Bill Browder and Irvin Kotler to shame our government in recognizing that this shouldn't be taking months. And the great parliamentarian who stood up on principle here is Member of Parliament Tom Kamek, who moved this motion in the House of Commons back in early April. And he moved this motion and seconded by Member of Parliament James Bazan. Because at the end of the day, colleagues, and I've said this before, human rights should not be a partisan issue. Human rights should be at the core value and principles of what we are all about as a Canadian society. We should, on a regular basis, stand up for these values, because that's what Canada is all about. It's about freedom, it's about democracy, it's about the rule of law, and it's about human rights. And never more than 2023 is democracy facing precarious times. Democracies are being challenged around the world, and many times we are letting this happen at our own peril and our own fault, because at the end of the day, we've become a little bit transactional when it comes to our values. Once upon a time, we had Canadians dying on the shores in Europe for freedom and liberty, but today we're willing to sell drones to a country that's murdering people in Artsakh or shutting down corridors in Lashing and not allowing food and medicine to go to people. We're allowing governments for, again, transactional reasons to abstain from votes in recognizing what's going on with the Uyghur people. Or we're going to turn a blind eye to all the people in prison and all those fighting for democracy in Cuba, because you know what? There's a couple of companies in Canada that are sending plane loads of Canadians cheap on beaches. And when we do that for a few $1 million or a few hundreds of millions of dollars, we really trade away who we are as nations. So when Tom Kamek and James Bazan move a motion to bestow the right of honorary citizenship to Mr. Kara-Murza in the House of Commons Committee, and it's supported by the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois, it should be an automatic reflex from our executive branch. They shouldn't be amending it, colleagues, which they did in April, basically just suggesting that they put out a message of condemnation and solidarity. Why the backpedaling on such an obvious motion, all very obvious to all of us in this place? Why is the government vacillating? Why are they hesitating in calling this out, especially after all the effort we put in support of the cause in Ukraine. It took 3 months. It took the intervention of Erwin Kotler and Bill Browder to step up and say to the government, this isn't a partisan issue, guys. This is an issue about humanity and human rights. So I applaud them for stepping out and doing it, but we have to become vigilant and ask ourselves, why is what's going on with Kara-Murza more important than what's going on with the Uyghur people? And I remind people in this chamber, this very chamber voted against the motion of recognizing what's going on with the Uyghur people as a genocide. We also have an executive branch of government that has been ignoring motions in the House of Commons calling on the government to list the IRGC as a terrorist group. And again, in this newfound enthusiasm to support human rights, last week, Senator Omadvar had a fantastic motion, also on behalf of the Senate, calling for the IRGC to be listed. We unanimously supported that motion, except for the government, right? We had the government on division not support the motion. So Senator Dalphon, Senator Omadvar, and I called to former Minister Kotler and Bill Browder, are they going to call on the government leader in this chamber to get up and support unanimously this call for, and the legitimate call for Kara-Murza to receive honorary citizenship? Because at the end of the day, Parliament speaks on behalf of the will of the people, especially the House of Commons, because they are elected. But government has to step up and respect the will of the people. So when you have motions calling for whatever reasons, whatever variety of motions, and we've seen it now time and time again, where the will of Parliament, doesn't matter if we're calling for the listing of the IRGC or recognizing what's going on to the Uyghur people as a genocide, or a simple motion calling for a public inquiry that gets support, a majority support in the House of Commons, and the government says, well, it's not binding to us. It calls into question, Senator Dalphon, all these motions. Why are we doing all of this? We're not doing it just to be an echo chamber. We're not doing it to put out a communique to say, look how noble we are. It's great. Nobility is a fantastic thing. But if it isn't followed with some action and some tangible support from the Crown, from our executive branch, it's all in vain. And I think at the end of the day, when we move these motions, unless we have some kind of certainty that it will be followed up, and now we have a tangible motion by MP Kamek, unanimously supported a few days ago in the House of Commons. I hope it'll be unanimously supported, not on division in this chamber. You can't get more unanimous parliamentary call. I hope the government will do this in an expeditious fashion. And colleagues, that's not the first time that governments have stood up and given honorary citizenship to great human rights activists. It's happened before. It hasn't happened in the last 8 years, but it has happened before. It happened in 2014. Malala Yousafzai was given honorary citizenship. The Aga Khan in 2010 was given honorary citizenship. The Dalai Lama in 2006. Nelson Mandela, 2001. And of course, none other than Raoul Wallenberg in 1985. So I hope that this motion will pass unanimously, and I hope that this renewed sense of enthusiasm for human rights is not a one-off. And I hope that when it comes to human rights, we put all our partisan politics aside and work in unison. Because at the end of the day, just last week, when I was speaking to Benedict Rogers, the executive director of Hong Kong Watch, he asked me, what's going on with your country's action on foreign interference? And by the way, colleagues, Russia is one of the primary culprits when it comes to foreign interference. It's one of the primary culprits when they put into place cyber attacks on our country, when they try to manipulate our social media. We have right now oligarchs that we know factually are running mining operations in my home province of Quebec, and our Foreign Affairs Ministry hasn't taken action to shut them down yet. It was in the news just a few months ago. We've asked questions about it in the House. So I'd like to see some tangible action from our government to go after the Russian regime in a tangible way, put into place Magnitsky sanctions, give honorary citizenships to very worthy individuals like Kara-Murza, but go all the steps further that are required to go through. Ban all these oligarchs that are coming into Canada and using this place as an ATM machine. So, the point I'm trying to make is when Benedict Rogers was here last week, he said, why is it only in Ottawa that issues like the Uyghur genocide or foreign interference is a partisan issue? He says in Washington, in London, in Paris, in Australia, in every other Western democracy, they're trying to deal with foreign interference. They're trying to find a way how Western democracies can find their way back to becoming, again, defenders of human rights in a tangible way, rather than being transactional in our foreign policy. He says, the only place I have visited where it seems to be a partisan issue, and I had no answer, because there really is no explanation. I'm not going to, there's no way I can say in a straight face that our government, doesn't matter what stripe it is, are in favor of authoritarian regimes. It's clear to me they're either being transactional and they're trying to be they're putting economic interests ahead of human rights, or they're being incompetent or ambivalent. Either way, it has to stop. So, colleagues, I know I've gone on a little bit too long given the time, but I think it's important. It's an issue that's important for me, and I think it's an important issue for Kara-Murza, and it's an important issue for all the political prisoners right across this country. It doesn't matter if they are in Turkey, if they are in China, if they are in Russia, if they are in Iran. We have an obligation to be a voice for what's just and what's right. Thank you.
Les sénateurs sont-ils prêts pour la question?
Our senators ready for the question.